Right after Hurricane Ida hit, families down in Louisiana's Bayou region weren't just left without homes.
Right, it was total devastation.
Yeah, I mean, it was so absolute that survivors were forced to live out of their cars, or even just in these flimsy little tents that they literally pitched on the shattered porches of their ruined houses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One survivor actually called it the purest form of hell. They were just wishing for a functioning roof so they could, take a bath.
Yeah, that really puts it into perspective.
It does. And that is the baseline reality we are looking at today. Because when you picture homelessness, it's so easy to just imagine this generic national crisis.
Hmm.
But the truth is, the lived reality of not having a roof over your head varies wildly depending on which state line you cross.
It really is a hyper-localized issue. I mean, the
Mm.
regional economies, the municipal zoning laws, and like you just pointed out with Hurricane Ida, the specific weather patterns completely rewrite the rules of survival from one state to the next.
Exactly.
What works in the Pacific Northwest might be entirely irrelevant on the Gulf Coast.
Which is exactly why we're building a scorecard for the state of Louisiana. For you, the listener, we are going to evaluate the systems on the ground, the policies, and that daily reality to figure out exactly how this state handles its most vulnerable residents.
Right, getting past just the statistics.
Yeah, we're taking a strictly documentary-style approach here in this deep dive, and we're building this scoring system in real time. We won't reveal the final grade all at once. It's going to evolve dynamically as we uncover the facts.
Which is going to be super interesting to track.
Totally. So let's just start by looking at the sheer scale of the issue. On any given night, there are 3,469 Louisians experiencing homelessness. That's about 8 out of every 10,000 residents.
And you know what's fascinating about that number is this really stark contradiction in the state's historical data. If you look at the long-term trend, like zooming out from 2015 to 2024, Louisiana actually saw a 15% drop in overall homelessness.
Wait, a 15% drop? I mean, on paper, that sounds like an incredible victory.
Right. It sounds like a massive victory until you look at the immediate short-term data.
Ah, okay. What does that show?
Well, from 2023 to 2024, the state experienced a sharp 10% spike.
Oh, wow. That's a huge jump for just 1 year.
Yeah. So while the decade-long trend looks like, it's slow progress, the immediate reality on the ground right now is rapidly deteriorating.
Yeah.
And what makes that 10% spike so alarming is that it happened while the national average actually saw a slight 3.3% decrease.
Oh, before those recent administrative changes, right?
Exactly. So Louisiana's local economic pressures are just completely outpacing its safety net right now.
So we have to ask who is actually falling through that net, because when you look at the demographics driving that recent spike, it completely shatters the stereotype of who is out on the street.
It really does.
The senior population, so people aged 55 and older now makes up a massive 24% of the unhoused population in Louisiana.
Almost a quarter.
Yeah.
Almost a quarter of the entire unhoused population are seniors.
That's just wild to me.
And it gets worse, honestly. The number of seniors over 65 experiencing homelessness has spiked by 78% over just a 6-year period. We are looking at a highly vulnerable group of people here. These are individuals who have likely worked their entire lives, and now they're living on fixed Social Security incomes. And they're colliding with a housing market that has just exploded in cost.
Exactly. When you are on a fixed income, there is no picking up an extra shift to cover a rent hike.
Right. The money just isn't there.
And it isn't just seniors feeling this squeeze either. Family homelessness has soared by 69% in just 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And geographically, the epicenter of this crisis is the New Orleans and Jefferson Parish metropolitan area. But we also have to circle back to the state's unique geography. Because in Louisiana, extreme weather is a massive systemic driver.
Absolutely. If we look at the mechanics of this, the Gulf Coast vulnerability to major hurricanes acts as a direct, instant pipeline into homelessness.
Yeah.
It isn't a slow economic decline for a lot of these folks. It's literally an overnight catastrophe.
Just look at the aftermath of Ida in places like Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes. The estimate suggests that up to 90% of homes in some of those hard-hit coastal areas were deemed uninhabitable.
90%. That's hard to even fathom.
Right. We are talking about whole apartment complexes, entire nursing homes, just wiped off the map.
And the crucial context here is that the people displaced by these massive storms are often the ones least able to relocate.
Yeah.
Many were already living below the poverty level, living paycheck to paycheck. They have no flood insurance. They have absolutely no financial safety net to fall back on when the walls literally cave in.
Which brings us to the foundation of our scorecard. If you lose your home to a Category 4 hurricane or even just, a standard eviction notice, your ability to recover depends entirely on whether you can afford a new place to live.
Exactly.
So let's evaluate our first category, housing affordability.
The math in Louisiana right now is just brutal. The state is currently operating with a shortage of over 220,000 affordable rental units for very and extremely low-income individuals.
Wait, a 220,000 unit shortage?
Yep. The physical inventory simply does not exist.
Okay, let's ground that in some real numbers for you guys listening to understand the lived reality here, specifically looking at the New Orleans area. The data shows the fair market rent for just a basic one-bedroom apartment is $11,149 a month.
Right.
And to afford that without being severely cost-burdened, meaning you still have money left over for food, utilities, medicine, you need to be earning a wage of at least $22.10 an hour.
But the reality is that an extremely low-income resident, which makes up a huge portion of the people entering the homeless system, cannot command that kind of wage.
Yeah, not at all.
For them, the absolute maximum affordable rent they could safely manage is just $456 a month.
I want to focus on that gap for a second because it's staggering. You have a maximum budget of $456, but the cheapest functional apartment is almost $1,150.
Yeah, it's mathematically impossible.
It's like staring at a ladder where the bottom three rungs have been completely sawed off. I mean, how are you supposed to climb out of a financial crisis when the distance between your paycheck and basic rent is a $700 canyon?
You can't.
You can't budget your way out of a $700 monthly deficit.
You really can't. I mean, you could cut every single luxury, every discretionary expense, and you still wouldn't make rent. And that severe lack of affordable living wage housing is cited by 100% of surveyed providers as the primary inescapable driver of homelessness in the region.
Wow, 100%. Because of this impossible math and the sheer lack of physical units available, this lowers the overall picture for our evolving state score.
Yeah, definitely.
So if that ladder is missing its bottom rungs and you are completely priced out of the private rental market, your only remaining safety net is an emergency shelter. So let's look at Category 2, shelter access. What actually happens when Louisianans try to claim a bed?
Well, they hit a massive systemic bottleneck. Let's look at New Orleans again, since it has the highest concentration of the unhoused population in the state. There are 12 shelters operating in the area, but they are operating at a constant maximum capacity, especially for men and for families.
Yeah, the sources noted something really telling about the daily intake process. One shelter actually has to prioritize men during their daily lineup because they always run out of beds.
Right.
To the point where they're forced to use a separate overflow area on the women's side just to fit people inside the building.
And when you look at families with children, the space is so incredibly limited that providers strictly require a coordinated entry referral just to get a temporary stay.
Let's define what that actually means on the ground, because coordinated entry sounds like a helpful, streamlined system.
It does sound nice.
But what is the lived reality of that?
In practice, it means you can't just walk up to a shelter with your kids at 9 p.m. and get a bed.
Right.
You have to be processed through a centralized bureaucracy. You have to sit down for an assessment, answer deeply personal questions about your vulnerabilities and trauma to get assigned a priority score, and then you are placed on a master wait list. You have to navigate this entire administrative maze while you are in an active, terrifying state of crisis.
And we also have to talk about the physical conditions inside these facilities once you actually do get a bed. Because New Orleans operates a 296-bed shelter that is designated as low barrier.
Which, in theory, sounds great.
Right. A massive facility designed to get people out of the elements with minimal hurdles sounds like exactly what the city needs. But audits reveal documented ongoing maintenance and sanitary issues at this specific shelter.
Yeah, we're talking about basic minimum habitability standards. Things like clean air, sanitary bathrooms, and secure personal space.
Which are so vital.
Exactly. These aren't luxuries. They are public health necessities. But there has been minimal monitoring by the city, despite them knowing about these ongoing issues for quite a while.
Which puts an individual in an agonizing position. When a shelter is fundamentally unsafe or unsanitary, it forces people to make a terrible choice.
Right. Do you endure those conditions indoors, or do you take your chances sleeping on the concrete?
Exactly. When you combine those massive wait lists with dangerous facility conditions, the current draft score takes a hit.
Definitely a big hit.
So, if the shelters are full or you feel safer outside, you end up on the street. Which brings us to Category 3, criminalization and enforcement. When you are forced onto the sidewalks of Louisiana, how does the system treat you?
Well, it brings you directly face-to-face with municipal law enforcement. In New Orleans, the city operates under a formalized encampment decommissioning policy.
Which is just a fancy term for sweeps, right?
Simply put, yes, these are sweeps. The Office of Homeless Services and Strategy will post notices, usually giving a 1-week warning, then a 72-hour notice, and finally a 24-hour warning before a sweep. They do sometimes print them in multiple languages to engage residents before the official closure, to be fair.
So they give you, what, 3 days to pack up your entire life and disappear? But what the data reveals about how people actually adapt to these sweeps is fascinating. 65% of the unsheltered population in New Orleans is concentrated in just 4 specific zip codes.
Right, primarily the downtown and French Quarter areas where the services and the foot traffic are centralized.
But here is the crucial detail. Only 27% of those people actually live in highly visible encampments. You know, those clusters of tents you see from the highway with 10 or more people.
Oh, interesting. So where are the rest of them?
The other 73% are completely hidden. They are living in pairs or entirely alone, tucked away in alleys, under bridges, and in abandoned spaces specifically to avoid law enforcement and the risk of being swept.
Wow. And this raises a profound question about the actual mechanism of these sweeps.
Yeah.
Because if the goal of a city is to resolve homelessness, scattering 73% of your unsheltered population into hiding makes that goal incredibly difficult to achieve.
Obviously.
I mean, outreach workers can't find them, you can't provide basic health care, you can't deliver vital medications, and you certainly can't assess them for that complicated coordinated entry housing pipeline if you don't even know what abandoned building they're sleeping in.
It doesn't solve the crisis. It just pushes the crisis deeper into the shadows. And because of this focus on displacement over actual resolution, this lowers the overall picture for our scorecard.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
All right, we are halfway through our evaluation categories, which means it is time to pause for a moment. We are putting a preliminary score overlay up on the screen right now for you.
And we really want to emphasize that this is just the draft score.
Right.
It reflects the first half of our deep dive, the crushing lack of affordable housing, the severe bottlenecks and safety issues in the shelter system, and the municipal enforcement policies that are actively pushing people into hiding.
Exactly. This is not the final verdict on Louisiana. The next 3 categories evaluate how the state handles mobile homelessness, the innovation happening in street outreach, and the actual pipeline to permanent housing. And what we found there could significantly change this final result.
So let's keep unpacking the reality on the ground.
Let's do it. So, Category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness. If you are part of that 73% trying to stay hidden from municipal sweeps, you might turn to your car. How does Louisiana treat vehicle dwelling?
It is a completely fragmented legal landscape.
Yeah.
Your rights essentially change depending on exactly where your tires are parked.
Oh boy.
Now, at the state level, Louisiana is actually surprisingly lenient.
Really?
Yeah. The Department of Transportation and Development, the DOTD, manages the highway rest areas. And their policy is that there are absolutely no maximum time limits for safety-related rest.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I understand this. A state government just allows people to park and sleep in their vehicle indefinitely at a highway rest stop.
Basically, yes.
That seems totally counterintuitive to how most governments operate. What is the catch here? Why hasn't every unhoused person with a working transmission just relocated to a state highway?
Because it's a jurisdictional minefield. At the state rest stop, yes. As long as you keep your belongings and your pets inside the vehicle and you don't create a public disturbance, the state leaves you alone. They even have 247 sheriff's deputies providing on-site security, which is a massive relief for people terrified of being assaulted on the street.
That's huge.
But you can't live at a rest stop forever. Eventually, you have to drive into town to buy food, go to a doctor's appointment, or, go to work.
And the second you drive your car off that state highway and cross into a city limit, the rules flip entirely.
Precisely. Municipalities use their local zoning codes and anti-camping ordinances to aggressively criminalize living in your vehicle.
Right.
In New Orleans, overnight parking of RVs is completely banned, and standard street vehicles must be moved every 3 days. In Shreveport, it is strictly prohibited to sleep in any vehicle parked on a public street, period.
Wow. And if you try to find a quiet, safe spot like, say, the LSU campus over in Baton Rouge, campus security will immediately boot and tow your car at your own expense.
Which is devastating.
Yeah, so you have this genuine lifeline at the state level, but these municipal laws act as a trap. You get a citation you can't pay, Your car gets towed, and the system literally steals your only form of shelter, putting you right back on the concrete.
Yep.
Because of this deep conflict between state leniency and municipal punishment, this shifts the score. It's a real mixed bag.
It really is.
But let's look at category 5, outreach and social services. Let's talk about the people trying to intervene. When folks are hiding out in their cars or dodging sweeps in abandoned buildings, who is actually going out there to help them?
This is where we start to see some much-needed systemic hope. There are active street outreach teams doing incredible, grueling work in Louisiana.
That's great to hear.
In Shreveport, an organization called Hope Connections sends teams directly into the field, physically tracking down people in those abandoned buildings and vehicles. But the biggest structural innovation we are seeing is coming from the Louisiana Housing Corporation.
Oh, yes. The Safe Havens program.
Right. The LHC utilized disaster recovery funding to launch Safe Havens in Shreveport, starting with a 37-bed facility, and they are currently building another 60-bed facility over in Lafayette.
And what is truly amazing about these safe havens is the lived reality of how they operate, because they are the absolute definition of low barrier.
Totally.
We talked earlier about the bureaucratic nightmare of standard shelters. The safe havens strip all of that away. They don't require you to show a government ID. They don't demand income verification. There are no mandatory sobriety checks at the door.
That's amazing.
They welcome individuals with severe untreated mental illnesses and physical disabilities. And crucially, they even allow people to bring their pets inside.
That pet policy is huge, and it's something people often overlook.
Yeah.
For a lot of unhoused individuals, a dog or a cat is their only companion, their only source of unconditional love, and often their primary source of physical security. Traditional shelters almost never allow pets.
Which forces a person to choose between abandoning their best friend or sleeping in the rain.
Exactly. And the lack of an ID requirement is just as critical. When a city conducts a sweep or a hurricane floods a neighborhood, birth certificates and driver's licenses are destroyed.
Gone.
Right. And replacing an ID takes money, takes transportation, and months of navigating the DMV, which are resources an unhoused person simply doesn't have. By removing these institutional barriers, these safe havens actually reach the chronically homeless population that the rest of the system completely leaves behind.
It's a model that actually treats human beings with dignity rather than suspicion. And because of these innovative low-barrier outreach programs, this raises the overall picture for our scorecard.
Absolutely. It's a massive bright spot.
But outreach and temporary safe havens ultimately lead us to our final and most important metric. Category 6, pathways to permanent housing. Outreach is incredible, but does it actually lead to a permanent set of keys?
Well, this is where the data reveals a massive systemic bottleneck. If we look at the state's inflow and outflow data for a single year, 8,494 people entered the homeless response system in Louisiana. But in that same time frame, only 5,110 people were permanently housed.
So you are operating with a nearly 66% deficit right out of the gate.
Right.
We have to look at this like a bathtub with a clogged drain, where the faucet is running on full blast. The water, which in this case are human beings in active crisis, has nowhere to go but to spill over the edges and flood the streets.
That structural deficit is exactly why the shelters are always at maximum capacity and why men are sleeping on the women's overflow floor. The back end of the pipeline is completely jammed because, like we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive, the physical affordable housing units just do not exist.
But there is a bright spot we absolutely have to acknowledge here, which is how some groups are trying to empty that bathtub. In New Orleans, the Unity Collaborative recognized how dangerous this backlog was, and they utilized a tool called rapid rehousing, specifically targeted at this street population.
And we should clarify how rapid rehousing functions. It's essentially a bridge.
Right.
The program provides short-term rental assistance. So they pay a landlord directly to bypass that massive hurdle of a first month's rent and security deposit while providing case management to help the person stabilize their income.
It's like trying to bail out that overflowing bathtub with a teacup. I mean, it might be small compared to the faucet, but for the water it scoops up, it is life-saving.
Completely.
And the data proves it works. Because despite the overall rise in homelessness statewide, this targeted rapid rehousing effort managed to drop street homelessness, which is the most vulnerable, dangerous kind of homelessness, by 12% in a single year in New Orleans.
It's a vital proof of concept. It proves that when you bypass the bureaucratic bottlenecks and provide direct financial assistance and case management to the most vulnerable, you can get them off the concrete.
Yeah.
But as you said, the teacup is fighting an uphill battle against the larger math of a 220,000-unit housing shortage.
Because of this profound tension between incredible localized success and a massive statewide backlog, this shifts the score one final time.
Okay, moment of truth.
Which brings us to our final summary. We've evaluated the lived reality and the systems across all 6 categories for you. So let's break down the final perfectly homeless state scorecard for Louisiana.
Let's methodically review the state's major strengths first. Louisiana features highly innovative, low-barrier safe havens that treat people with real dignity. It offers surprisingly lenient state-level highway rest areas that provide a safe harbor for vehicle dwellers, and it has demonstrated highly effective rapid rehousing efforts that successfully reduce street homelessness in its largest city.
But the major weaknesses are severe and they're systemic. There is a crushing shortage of affordable housing. There is local municipal criminalization that forces nearly 3/4 of the unsheltered population into hiding, and a massive inflow versus outflow deficit that leaves the entire pipeline backlogged.
Right.
So let's assign the final grades.
For housing affordability, Louisiana receives an F. The gap between wages and fair market rent is simply insurmountable for the extremely low income. For shelter access, a D. The constant bottlenecking and documented habitability issues create too much risk for those seeking refuge.
For criminalization and enforcement, also a D. Pushing 73% of your unhoused population into the shadows makes the crisis infinitely harder to solve.
Exactly.
For vehicle-dwelling friendliness, a C. The state rest areas provide a genuine, safe lifeline, but the municipal zoning laws act as a punitive trap.
For outreach and social services, a B. The safe haven model is a fantastic, replicable bright spot that removes the hurdles of IDs and pets.
Love that.
And finally, for pathways to permanent housing, a C-. The rapid rehousing programs are doing heroic work on the ground, but that 66% system deficit drags the whole pipeline down.
All right, tallying all of that up. The final, perfectly homeless state score for Louisiana is a 45 out of 100, a D-.
The state receives this exact score because it is a system defined entirely by tension. You have incredibly dedicated outreach workers and innovative low-barrier programs fighting a daily war against crushing economic realities and localized criminalization. The safety net exists, but it is currently buckling under the sheer weight of the affordable housing shortage.
It is a system holding its breath. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder today. If the Louisiana housing system is currently backlogged by a 66% deficit in permanent housing placements on a perfectly normal sunny day, what happens to this fragile, jammed pipeline when the next major Gulf Coast hurricane renders thousands more homes instantly uninhabitable?
Yeah, it is a storm they have to prepare for right now before it ever makes landfall.
That's the perfectly homeless state score for Louisiana. Let me know in the comments, and if there's a state you'd like to see next, tell me below. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next state.
This is a 50-state journey through how America actually treats people without housing, and every state tells a different story. If you'd like to support the project, visit the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store and pick up a PH hoodie. Every purchase helps fund future episodes and keeps these stories in front of the public. Wear the logo. Start a conversation. Because homelessness isn't someone else's problem anymore. It's happening in every state, every city, and more neighborhoods than most people realize. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next state.